I was sitting back here, the doctor kept asking me.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back from lunch. And for those of you who are just joining us this afternoon, I'd like to welcome all of you to the ICAS Fall Symposium 2016. And this is the second half of the ICAS Fall Symposium 2016 on the Korean military issues and U.S. national security. And we have 4 speakers in this segment, so given the limited time, I'll be brief with my remarks so that we can get right into the main part of the program. The 4 speakers are the Honorable Dr. John Hanley, President and CEO of CSIS, the Honorable Dr. Michael Green, Senior Vice President for Asia and Japan Chair, CSIS, the Honorable Professor Dr. Dave Shambo, Professor Political Science and International Affairs, George Washington University, and the Honorable General Jack Weinstein, Lieutenant General, U.S. Air Force, Deputy Chief of Staff, Strategic Deterrence, and Nuclear Evaluation, Headquarters, U.S. Air Force, Pentagon. And today's discussants are all ICAS fellows: Joseph Roscoe, non-resident senior associate, CSIS; General Chen Bum, visiting scholar, SICE, Johns Hopkins University; and Dennis Halpin will be joining here a little later, visiting scholar, SICE, Johns Hopkins University; and Peter Hussey, President, Geostrategic Analysis, Senior Director, Strategic Studies, Mitchell Institute. And will be joining us a little later. Tom Kim, Washington correspondent and columnist, the Korea Times, Seoul, Korea; and Larry Nix, Senior Associate, CSIS. And all of them are the experts in their respective professional field, will help us better understand the issues during the course of this deliberation. And for those who are new to our format, I have one comment about the format of these proceedings. Unlike the panel style, each speaker will lead his own session individually, followed by Q&A exchanges with our discussant, and the floor will be open to the audience for your participation with the discussant and speakers. So, at this time, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, the Honorable John J. Hanley, the President and CEO of the Center for Strategic and International Studies, one of the most distinguished and respected thinkers and leaders in this policy and foreign relations community in Washington, D.C. And I must tell you that I am particularly grateful to John for accepting our invitation to appear our platform back in May. And he picked the date of this day, October 25th, and he kept his commitment for all these last 5 months. And we have to fit around our schedule around this October 25th day. And here we are. And we have the privilege of hearing Dr. Hanley speaking on the U.S. ROK alliance and the North Korea's nuclear threat. Thank you.
Can I sit here? Is that okay?
Oh, sure.
Because everybody says, oh, I'd like to sit here. Eventually, we'll turn it into a panel discussion, so it makes more sense. Well, thank you. I forgot that I gave you a date I could make. I didn't tell you had to hold the conference. I apologize for that. And I've got a big thing this afternoon. I have to depart at 2, so I apologize. Let me begin by making kind of 7 broad propositions, and then try to bring a little bit of a focus to it, and I'll count on you guys to help make more sense out of this. First, let me just say, I think that when we'll have a new president here in a couple of weeks, and they'll be inaugurated in January, they will go through a strategic review, just like President Obama ordered, you know, in 2011, 2012. You know, it led to what was called the pivot, you know, to Asia. Poor choice of words, but an exceptionally important thing that happened, because that was the first time in 350 years of American history, 100 years before we became a country, 350 years where America said its first priority was Asia, not Europe. And it's really, you really need to pause to reflect on the significance of that. We've been Europe dominated in our strategic thinking for 350 years. And this is the first time I said that Asia was the first priority. And it constitutes a recognition of the significance of the rise of China and the way it will affect the geopolitical reality in Asia and in the world, actually. I think the next president is going to undertake a comparable review, and I personally believe that the next president is going to conclude that Asia is our first priority. I think that will be continued. I do not think you'll see a reversion. There certainly is some conversation in the campaigns, especially in the Clinton campaign. There's some conversation that we need to put more of a focus on Russia. And we probably do, but I do not think it will change the rank prioritization of where we see our strategic interests. I think we'll conclude our strategic interests are still going to be first in Asia. So that's number one. The second proposition is I think North Korea's military is becoming weaker and weaker. You know, when I was a young kid and used to first start going to Korea, when I was on the Armed Services Committee, even before that, when I was at the Congressional Budget Office. You know, at that stage, the North Koreans routinely would have 2 exercises a year and put several divisions into the field to conduct exercises. They barely can get companies into the field now. I mean, this is becoming a weaker and weaker military. What happens when when militaries become weaker and weaker, is they put priority on asymmetric resources in order to have impact. And I think that's what the nuclear program is. I think they also have a focus on chemical and biological weapons and special forces. But those are asymmetric approaches to, it shouldn't mask the reality that this is a dramatically weakened military. And it's going to get weaker, I think, as things go. That's number 2. Number 3, I think that I rearranged my sequence here. I'm trying to think which is the best way to say it. I'd say number 3 is very important for us, is that the ROK leadership and frankly the population, not average citizens as well as elites, are starting to conclude with a louder voice that they no longer can count on America's nuclear extended guarantee. This is a worry. Chosun Ilbo had an editorial maybe 6 months ago, 9 months ago, that questioned whether they could count on America's nuclear retaliatory guarantee as an underpinning of their security. I think it's the byproduct of now 7 or 8 years of very rigorous activity on the part of the North Koreans developing nuclear weapons, and they're asking themselves, does America's guarantee to extend its nuclear deterrent cover us? And it's no longer a fringe discussion. You know, I mean, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, this would be a conversation you would rarely hear in South Korea, and usually by kind of wacky people, you know, but that's not the case anymore. It's now much more broadly being felt and argued. And I think I took the Chosun Ilbo editorial to be a warning shot to America, to say, you know, this is heading in a direction we're not confident with, and we're raising questions with you, can we still trust you? And I think that's becoming a bigger and bigger factor. This becomes a complicated factor. We'll talk about it a bit. But I think this third proposition is that I think that there's a great questioning in our extended guarantee commitment. Number 4, the Chinese, in my view, made a colossal mistake by opposing THAAD. You all know THAAD, you know the issue, don't you? I just met this morning with a Chinese ambassador. We were talking about this. I said, you guys made a big mistake on opposing THAAD because you're opposing a system that has only one application, and that's to defend people. I mean, if we had proposed to bring Lance back in the Korean Peninsula with a nuclear warhead, you know, a short-range ICBM that could attack China, you'd have a right to be upset. Instead, you're upset about a system that's entirely defensive. You guys really read this wrong, profoundly wrong. And you say, well, it may affect it, you know, it can reach out and cover China. Well, that's horse hockey. You know, I mean, you know, I can't do this geography here, but, you know, Korea's here, China's all here, we're over here. The missiles go like that. They don't fly over Korea. So this argument that THAAD somehow affects Chinese nuclear deterrent is nonsense. Completely wrong. And intentionally wrong. And it's designed to try to intimidate the South Korean government and the South Korean people. And it's failed. It's intimidated the left, but they were already there, you know. But for rank and file Koreans, I think it just backfired big time. Chinese made a huge mistake on opposing that, because, you know, if we take to a logical extension the South Korean desire to see a tangible American expression that our nuclear deterrent covers them, that means we would have to put nuclear weapons in a theater that would legitimately be seen as a threat to China. I mean, they made a colossal mistake opposing that. You know, they really should recover from it as soon as possible, but I don't think they can do it, you know. So that's the fourth problem. It really screwed that up. Fifth, which is backdrop for this, but I think it's still important to say. At no time in my professional history have we seen such close strategic alignment of our interests between the United States, the Republic of Korea, and China about what we to do in the region. We all are unhappy with North Korea, everybody. And the first and highest goal we all have is to try to reverse the nuclear momentum of the North Koreans. The question is how we do that. Now, I was in a meeting last week with fairly senior people who are, I respect them, they are very thoughtful people, but there was conversation in this meeting, these were Americans, conversation about needing to change our policy on North Korea to formally embrace regime change. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean we will use our military force to invade North Korea to change the regime? Probably not. Does does it mean that we'll engage in both overt and covert means to destabilize North Korea? You know, I wouldn't want to get in their way. They're doing a pretty good job of doing that to themselves. But I don't know that we would, keeping this strategic alignment of our interests, Korea's interests, and America's interests, I'm not sure that gets stronger if we have an explicit campaign of destabilization. I think it would probably be quite counterproductive to it. I think that's going to be the backdrop of thinking for the next administration when they do their strategic review. Because there's no question that we've got a more difficult North Korea on our hands. It's more difficult because we've got a less predictable and less mature leader who has ruthlessly changed everybody around him, and of course, you will not, he's not likely to have very many people that are going to say to him, hey boss, I think you got this wrong. You know, we're thinking about this the wrong way. You don't live long in North Korea if you do that, Kim Jong-un. So I think we've got a rather immature, maybe reckless young man who does not have many structures around him to help him think through complicated problems. And that becomes a real problem for us. But I do think we have to keep firmly in mind our strategic alignment of interests with the Republic of Korea and with China, and how we're going to take advantage of that moving forward. So that's number 5. Maybe that was number 6.